Every year at the end of ordinary time, before we begin Advent, we have readings that speak of the end of time. Last weekend I spoke about the resurrection of the body, and connected to that is also the end of time and Jesus' return. Jesus says in the gospel today, "All that you see here, the days will come. There will not be left a stone upon another stone that will not be thrown down." And he's first referring to the temple and the destruction the temple will go through. But it also applies to the transformation that will occur at the end of time. So people are immediately interested. They want to know what this is all about. So it's not surprised if we are too. We believe that Jesus will come again to judge the living and the dead, as it says in the Creed, and that our world will pass away into a world more heavenly. But we might ask, like they did, "Teacher, when will this happen? And what sign will there be when all these things are about to happen?" We want to know. Now, it's not just us. There's plenty of movies out there, for example, that entertain us with various doomsday scenarios. Anything from global natural disasters or incurable disease to aliens or zombies or things like that. And while those are often fantastic and fictional, there are people that do claim that we ourselves will bring about the end of all things, the final disaster to our planet, with our own misuse of the world, or technology, or scientific knowledge. And today's first reading from Malachi says, "Lo, the day is coming, blazing like an oven, when all the proud and all evildoers will be stubble. And the day that is coming will set them on fire." Sounds like a pretty bleak prospect there. So what does it all mean? What should we think about the end of the world? Should we listen to those who may cry out that the end is near? Well, Jesus has told us that he will return. When we look at the scriptures, we know it'll be public. We will have no question when it is Jesus and his arrival. His return will indeed mark the end of life as we know it here on earth. But the world is not going to end by our own doing. It's going to be by God's own intervention. In a sense, we do live in the end times, since it's true that Jesus could return at any point. But he does point out that his return will be accompanied by circumstances that are far beyond our own control. In the gospel, when Jesus is asked about the signs that might warn us of his coming, Jesus affirms that first we'll see various events of conflict between good and evil. Wars and insurrections, nations will rise against nations, earthquakes, famines, plagues, awesome sights and mighty signs in the sky. But we need to note that after he mentions that, he also says, such things must happen first, but it will not immediately be the end. Because if you think about it, those kinds of things happen really in every generation. There's been wars and natural disasters in the past, and there's likely to be more of those kinds of things in the future. We can get caught up in the specific things that we happen to see in our own time. Jesus has said not to be surprised by those things. Those things will happen in a world where good and evil have to battle against one another. Jesus says that there'll be people that will come claiming that it is he returned. That they'll try to subtly lead us astray into other things to make us happy. Jesus says, do not follow them. That there'll be time of persecution even for the faith. That we may be handed over by kings, governors, religious leaders, parents, brothers, relatives, and friends. And he says they may even put some of you to death. It will lead to your giving testimony. Giving testimony. The word testimony there is where the word martyrdom comes from. Those who give testimony offer their very lives for the Lord. And there's been many moments of martyrdom throughout the history of the church. Christians giving their life for the faith. And so all these things have happened in different places across the globe in the past. And so we shouldn't expect that they would never happen again. We never know what the future may hold. Jesus says such things must happen first, but it will not yet immediately be the end. And so in this, Jesus is not really trying to satisfy our curiosity about the exact moment of future events, but really protecting us from getting discouraged and scandalized when evil happens in our own time. It's really a call to trust him when we see those things. You see, God doesn't desire bad things happen to us, but he is here through them all. Our faith can help us to understand many things, but too often we can be so curious about some of those details, about how and why, because we want to know, we want to be in control of everything. But ultimately we can't. We can't be in control of everything because we're not God. And so his message to us is this: do not be afraid. Even if we're called to be persecuted even unto death, he tells us not a hair on your head will be destroyed. That he would never leave us. I myself will give you the wisdom in speaking, that all your adversaries will be powerless to resist and refute. St. Paul in the second reading encourages us to continue to live and work as Christians in the world. We must remain as faithful disciples. By your perseverance, Jesus says, you will secure your lives. And so the conclusion of human history, whether it will occur today or many, many years after we ourselves have died, it's put before us as a divine event, not a natural one, not one that we caused. Jesus will indeed return. His return will be public. The world will end not by our own doing, but by that special intervention of God himself. And so, in a sense, we do live in the end times, that Jesus could come at any moment. But there will first have to be events of conflict between good and evil. And therefore we must place the future in his hands, not our own. We must continue to work hard in both our earthly tasks and also growing in our relationship with God. In other words, we must be ready. We must be ready for whenever he may come. And if we grow close to Jesus here and now, then the transition of seeing him face to face at the end of time will simply be coming into the presence of the one that we already know and love.